So we had a break-in and no one could see what was happening because the trees were blocking the view. So my dad was like, right, we need to cut the trees down for security. We need to cut the trees down. I was ready to tie myself to the trees. I cared so much. I was like, you are ruining this earth. You cannot cut down trees. I just cared so much about this. But I saw that as separate. I thought this was different to the work that I was doing.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Chaya, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Maurice. So I'm Chaya Mistry. I'm a human leadership and communications coach and consultant. So I live in the Netherlands. I'm British. I have Indian heritage. And the work I do is born from my sort of journey from what I studied to what I worked in to what I changed to. So I'm happy to be here and really lovely to have been invited, Maurice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and it's great to meet again, although now virtually. But the first time we met was during the Inner Development Goals Summit a couple of weeks ago in Stockholm. We will talk about that as well. But my audience is always curious about where is the guest born and raised, and tell us a bit about that. Were you born in the UK or in India?
Yeah, I left you with lots of teasers. So yeah, I have I was born in England.
Okay.
My family is from India. So my dad was born in India, and then at 5 years old, he moved to Tanzania, where his mother and father had moved to with the British Army. My grandfather had gone to East Africa. And then at 17, my dad went to England and settled, and very well settled. He really was on a mission to be really a part of England. My mum, it comes from the same sort of part of India as my dad. And she lived there for 22 years. And then when my dad came and visited India to get married, they met very briefly and got married very quickly. And then my mum also came to England. So I was born into very much an immigrant family.
Mm-hmm.
And was brought up very much like you make the most of everything, and you always seek more potential. You seek what you can do in the world and what the world has to offer to you. So I had a really loving upbringing, but also like you got to work hard. You've got to make the most of the life you have. And I lived in England, and then at how old was I now? 26. I moved to the Netherlands. So yeah, I've been here for a long time, almost 2 decades. And I came here originally for my husband's work, and we came for 2 years, and we're still here. So
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
I know how that goes. So in the countries where I started to work, with the same thing. Bangladesh, we thought 1.5 years. We stayed there for 7, and in Indonesia for 10. Before you talk about going to the Netherlands, to accompany your husband. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have an older sister. She's only a
Okay.
year older than me, so we grew up very close.
Yeah.
And then a younger brother. who's
Hmm.
then 8 years younger than me.
Okay. And where are they now?
So they're both in the UK. They're both,
Okay.
yeah, I'm the only one who's sort of away.
Yeah.
And yeah, and my parents are getting older. So, at Christmas, they're all arriving and we're having um, probably it's the first time we have Christmas as a full family from my side of the family
Mm,
and also with the children. So, yeah,
nice.
I have lovely nieces and nephews. So,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
When we go back to your upbringing in the UK, if I ask you, to come up with an anecdote in terms of, this kind of summarizes or is a good example of what I experienced, and then ultimately, led me to getting into the work that I'm now doing.
Mm. Um, so I studied psychology and I studied it for many reasons. Um, my mother is a very emotionally intelligent woman. She always called herself like a stupid woman because she wasn't educated. She can read and write, but it's really she makes a lot of spelling mistakes and things. We know now that she is probably undiagnosed, but probably dyslexic. Um, she probably also has ADHD, if I look at how that went. But at the time, I think I had been brought up in this hugely loving but very emotionally intelligent kind of space. That certainly influenced my interest in human relationships, I think. Um, I also just explored this space and I was given permission by my father, who was he was sort of like a feminist, to be honest, because I see
Mm,
he pushed for both me and my sister to not be limited by who we appear to be.
mm,
So he always said, there's a color bar. So you will have to work twice as hard. This is from his experience of having arrived in the 60s in England, having to work and really seeing the inequalities. So he prepared us for that. So he said you have to work twice as hard to be able to get the same as those with more privilege than you. And then you are a woman, so you need to work 3 times as hard. Um, Besides that, he was very clear, study sciences, choose the hard edges. Don't do soft, fluffy, you know. Uh, so, I mean, my best grades at high school were maths and sciences, but I didn't choose that. I chose psychology, and I think that slightly broke my father's heart. But he was sort of happy in that I took a Bachelor of Science and not a Bachelor of Arts. So he was really like, you make sure there's no reason for anyone to ever think of you as less than. And I think I've taken that philosophy with me. Um, I chose psychology also, I think, because in my family there were pockets of mental ill health. I have an uncle who is he has been in and out of psychiatric institutions, and I was so curious to understand. Like, this was a family member, one who lived in our house. So when we were really young, when I was born, the house I was born into was um, the 3 brothers lived in that house. So my dad and our family, his brother and his family, and then also my uncle who was up in the loft. And this is the uncle that, I couldn't make sense of what happened, and I wanted to make sense. I wanted to make sense of how people exist in the world, how we find belonging, how we um, work in relationship with others. And of course, there's things I noticed in my own social identity. Did I belong? Where did I belong? I very strongly wanted to fit in with all my English friends. And at the same time, I really honored my Indian heritage and my culture and the food and the dress. And, I could hold the parallel of both of these things at the same time.
and when you grew up, were you, you know, together with your sister, um, one of the few in where you in the school where you were, or were there many, migrant children?
Um, what was noticeable?
Hmm.
In my primary school, there was me and my sister, and then maybe one or two other non-whites.
Mm.
Um, when I moved up to kind of middle school, that changed. That was then me, my sister, my cousin, and again just a few more, but it wasn't
Yeah.
the to me I didn't expect different to that.
Hmm.
We where we grew up. So in England, yeah, there are pockets where there are higher concentrations of immigrants. Um, and we didn't live in those areas. So my dad, when he was 17, he came to England and he was what was normal, he went and stayed with his uncle. So what was normal was you work, here's a bed, you sleep here in the daytime or in the nighttime because someone sleeps here in the daytime.
Mm.
Um, you know, you hand over your money and your uncle takes care of you, but you go and you work and this was the way. But my dad was educated, so he was not he saw himself as different and he could see his potential. Is that why do I need to be looked after? Because I can look after myself and let me see if I can forge a life of my own. So him and his brother went and they lived in small towns or small villages where there weren't actually that many immigrants. So we were the one Asian family in my village where I was born. We were, and people knew us. They didn't actually think of us as, I'm not sure what they thought of us as really, but to how I felt was I didn't really feel different. I probably didn't even know I was a different color, um, until I moved to a town where there were other immigrants. And actually, in um, the more people who looked like me didn't give me any more sense of belonging. In fact, when I got to middle school, or was it high school actually, um, there were, you know, a number of schools who all come then together. And I found that those people who'd come from the school where there were lots of immigrants, and actually they were the majority, actually, you would see that almost the immigrants and people who looked like me were the majority. They were discriminative to me.
Mm.
They said, "Oh, you look like this," or and asking me what's my caste, what's my who am
Mm.
I, trying to find out who I am. And these questions seemed really crazy to me because I always learned that you find out who someone is by connecting with them,
Mm.
by talking and understanding. And um, it was another world to me that there was more definition that was given to who I am that I didn't own, that was somebody decided that for me. So yeah, it was more jarring for me that actually because it came from people who I thought might bring me in and I might belong with them. And they almost like rejected me as one of them, but say,
Mm.
"Oh, you have white friends, so what does that mean?" And um, they kind of found it crazy that I chose to have white friends and not brown friends, It's like,
Hmm.
so yeah, it was an interesting time in those kind of teen years of exploring who I am.
Mm. And no, thank you for sharing that. And so then you decide to study psychology. Did it bring what you were expecting?
Hmm. I loved studying psychology. Yes, I think it did. I think my experience of studying psychology um, was like there were so many different layers to this, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, actually. I didn't know what kind of choices I would make after university. I slightly panicked after I graduated, and I just applied everywhere because, and I'd made a plan with my friends to go and travel the world for a year and say, you know what, let's
Mm.
just uh, worry about these choices when we get back, but let's go see the world because when do we get a time to do this?
Mm.
And then I got scared and thought, no, I have to get a job. I won't be employed. I just, all those fear triggers came in. And so
So
I
you
had
didn't you
applied.
didn't go on
I
on the
didn't go.
travel, and your friends did?
No, actually, even my friends
Nobody did.
didn't. They also got the same fear. We all got a little bit. I think also when
Yeah.
you start to see your others who are landing jobs, and then you think, okay, Oh, and what does that set them up for? So I chose a route which was psychiatry. So my step was, okay, I'm going to go, um, you need to do a year in a psychiatric, in a clinical setting. And then after that, you could apply for clinical training. And so, yeah, and in my year, so I worked in a psychiatric hospital for eating disorders, so anorexics, bulimics, and uh, it was a big maturing year. It was, you really see the impact of how we feel about ourselves on the world around us, and beautiful, intelligent, bright women who just yeah, it was really self-destructive, but also I just saw the world in which they lived, that it's very sad to see, but you see also young women who have actually quite a privilege in life, to choose to kind of self-destruct. Um, but that they see no other way out. And so, yeah, I mean, I learned a lot. I connected with them really deeply, probably too deeply. I care a lot, and that I honed that. Also, like dealing with really high stress situations. But I had a number of accidents in that job. I had the third accident put me on crutches for 6 weeks. And then I realized this is the universe is telling me something. So I finished up my whole year because otherwise I couldn't leave. I was on a lovely research project, and the professor at that time, so he was the leading professor in eating disorders in the UK. It was a real privilege to work with him, but he warned me, if you leave now, you can never come back. Like, you're not going to make it. You this is if you choose this is it now. Um, and so I kind of, yeah, do you know, the universe told me this was like so many signs that this was not the right thing for me. I was really
Mm.
glad for the experience to go and do that and experience that um kind of role and that kind of environment, but I knew also that this wasn't for me. So in knowing that, although there was some fear in leaving after your professor tells you something like that, um but I knew it was the right thing. So I went back home to my parents' house and started on a new route. But
Okay.
yeah, those lessons never left me. And I mean, my first job after that was working in a call center, actually. Like, and it was an alcohol company, and I was working through their most stressful time of their year, which is the run up to Christmas, when everybody's putting in their orders for their wine and champagne and whiskeys and all of this. And the stress level in this office is really high. But for me, I'm like, no one's dying. I had my last high stress uh, trigger was when a patient has run away and I know she's running to the motorway bridge to throw herself off it, and I know where to go and I have to run and try and get there and pull her into the car to save, like that to me was high stress. This was like someone didn't get their whiskey order. Um, it put a lot of things in perspective. And so my resilience was just, this was always my um yeah, benchmark. My I just measure things up to, is it life and death? Is someone going to die? Is this really I see people in emergency rooms and that stress that they're under, well, they have to be under, and that adrenaline helps you to then be of service. And is that adrenaline helping you to be of service, or is it holding you back and hurting you and your health? And is it worth it?
Let us make the step to the Netherlands, because that's where you ultimately started the company that you're running now. So you went to the Netherlands because you joined your husband, who found a job in the Netherlands, or your partner. Um, so how was that you had to, you had to make the decision to leave the UK, to leave the family? Yeah.
I didn't see it as a decision to leave.
Hmm.
It wasn't to leaving, it was an arriving.
Okay.
Um, so I had retrained in public relations and communication. I was working in communications jobs. A lot of kind of in between, a
Mm.
few jobs, nothing really that triggered some excitement in me, more like glamorous jobs. And so when I moved over to the Netherlands, and my husband had a transfer from his work, so it was like, okay, couple of years, and we went in with very um maybe it was naive, but we were really like, let's just see. Like, if worse comes to worse, we just come back. Like, nothing is forever. My dad certainly gave us some really inspirational motivation of like, go do, go make the most of everything, because that was his mindset in leaving his family.
Mm.
He had to do that, so he knew what that felt like. The first few weeks that we were there, we were really sad. We missed everybody. The first probably couple of months, actually. And also, we didn't really have a place to live. We were living out of hotels or temporary apartments. And so until we uh, bought a house, we actually bought a house, even though we were coming for just 2 years, we we knew that we had to make wherever we are home. And you have to make it feel like home and act as if it is home, because you need that. You need that grounding and a belonging somewhere, and with someone as well. We were with each other, and that was the important thing. I think that it probably forged our relationship in a really solid way, in that we only had each other in this country. We had been married maybe a year and a half. We hadn't actually lived together until we got married. So it was like, oh gosh, okay, we just got used to living with each other. And then now we live in another country. So, but we really connected with being here. We made the most and we still do make the most of what this country has to offer and what the experience has to offer. We made really good friends in our first year. Our friends who we made in our first couple of years are still our closest friends now.
Mm.
So we we found a space that feels like home. So.
So if I ask you, you know, name me the one difference between living in the UK and living in the Netherlands, what would you mention?
I think in England we would drive everywhere. So I think you have to drive places. I think the Netherlands one I find is like we cycle everywhere, and public transport. And I think that's one difference. I mean, just the landscape. The landscape actually means something really to me, because that's the place where I actually don't feel so at home here. The Netherlands is incredibly flat. Like, you can just see the horizon really far away. And I come from the Midlands in England with rolling hills, and um, the greenery is layered. Here, I find like it's a gradient of green. It goes from the vibrant green that's in front of you to a, a far away green. And that doesn't feel homely to me, because I didn't grow up with that. I really grew up in the countryside as well. So I love the rolling hills. So yeah, that's what I miss. But I think that yeah, there's lots of differences. England and the Netherlands is very close by, but culturally they're very different as well. I've
Yeah.
had to learn to be much more direct. So
Mm.
which I probably offend my family and friends by being so blunt now, but it is also I appreciate the clarity in which the Dutch express themselves and what they're trying to get across. So yeah.
Okay, let us talk about humanly. Your company. What is it about? Yeah, I mean, when people will open your website, the first thing they see is, well, one of the first things they see is the human whisperer.
Yeah. So I had somebody actually called me a human whisperer, and I think there's a few people who I know who are board whisperers, and they describe themselves as such. There is in my when I started working in the Netherlands, I worked for oil and gas company, and I thought, yeah, this will do. And I ended up working with engineers, scientists, really like the STEM. My dad was so proud, the STEM area, but really what I found was huge intelligence, IQ, incredible engineers who the things they built, the things they achieved, just in awe of. But the emotional intelligence, the things they need help on in being able to express themselves, being able to connect with people, this is where I could help. And this was the place where I really found like I really enjoyed it. So my role there was in internal communication. So I was working with leaders, most of the time very senior, very intelligent leaders, but I could help them in that working on their softer skills, being able to put a voice to what they were feeling inside. They could work on their leadership, but the leadership is only one part. Really, that leadership has to have impact on the other person. It has to be able to have a way in which you communicate that and connect with another person. And so that's where I found I really enjoyed the work I was doing. I put together a whole coaching program for leaders how to communicate really well. And then I realized I wanted to do this for myself. So I left and I set up Humany, and that was almost 6 years ago. And what I wanted to be able to do is use the skills I have to reach further, to be able to bridge a gap in between leadership and communication. What I felt I was doing was going upstream of the problem. When I was in a communications function, there were challenges. I already felt like this leader, I'm not sure, like, is he okay with himself? Does he know what's going on? Is he listening well to other people? Is he relating? And so going upstream of that problem meant actually I need to maybe train as a coach. So the first thing I did when I left was actually I became a coach. I invested in a very good coaching school, which really grounded me in that. And then I've um, worked the coaching into what I do, and I'm consulting around like change, but transformations that require behavior change. And then how do you do that? And so it really is working in the space of doing the inner work to make that outer change. And that bridge is your ability to connect through your leadership and communication.
And you know, when people check out your website, you mentioned that the way you work is by using this model, right? The human, now I can't. You have to help me. Human.
Yeah, it's very much evolving. So this the model I put together is a model I use for coaching. And when I say evolving, I'm finding that it's really become a model that I use in many different ways. So I can use it in thinking through transformation in organizations in terms of how do you really listen to the organization, try to understand with compassion. So that's kind of the first C. It's very seasonal, it's cyclical. But starting first in compassion and moving then to a curiosity. How do we understand our assumptions and judgments and hold those things with a more curious mindset? How do we then work towards courage? And that's maybe that's courage in the way we communicate. Maybe that's courage in doing hard things or learning to fail. Um, and and then tapping into creativity, because that's something that we as humans bring that AI can't do, that we are able to really sit with the things that make us creative humans and try to lean away from the things that limit our creativity. And so it's very cyclical. And I've noticed that whether it is thinking about change and transformation on an organizational level or on an individual level, I use this as a wonderful framework for coaching one-on-one, is that we start from really hearing a person, what's going on, and really feeling from their heart what's really the space in which they need to maybe even have compassion for themselves first, and then think about how they have compassion for the things that they're experiencing in the world, leaning into curiosity, leaning into the courage they might need to explore some of their challenges, or even just make braver steps. What's the thing that is in their purpose, their values, and help them take steps towards that. And really get creative with what their options are. So yeah, the framework is very much like I'm still finding more and more different layers of applications for how the model works. So yeah.
Mm. I was looking at it and I was kind of struck by the letter C. So it's about, you're trying to, you call it regenerate, an approach to regenerate for better human connection, the C of connection. And then you already mentioned, what you need is compassion, curiosity, courage, creativity. Community is an important other C, collective. How important is another C within that whole model? And that is Chaya.
Yeah. Oh, it's come from me, it's come from things that I notice I need. It's interesting, but that model, and it has evolved, as I said. There was a point when there were only three C's. Creativity was missing, and I couldn't understand. Something wasn't quite right with it. I couldn't understand what it was. Until I started on this journey. Somebody had mentioned to me, "Oh, you should try to read this book called The Artist's Way. It's all about creativity." And I realized that creativity was this piece that was missing, but also that I am very creative and it's in my bones. And so it was invisible to me because I thought that this was like a given. Um, so really realizing that that is a key part of it. And even in the word regenerative, I have had to explore. There is, of course, a lot around regenerative leadership. There's a lot, and I would really, if anybody's interested in that topic, Laura Storm and Giles Hutchins and Laura Storm wrote a book together called Regenerative Leadership. But Laura Storm also has this movement called the Generators, and it's a lovely course that takes you through a lot of depth in what regenerative leadership is. And part of the Chaya in that is really understanding that for how I contribute to regenerative leadership is that bridge that I was talking about, which is about the connection and the leadership and communication. So I actually have, for the book I'm writing still, um, 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 a kind of adaptation of this model in that these four C's, these are skills. These are the skills that you work on first with yourself, and the leadership has to first start with you. So let's work on your compassion for yourself, your curiosity about who you are, what triggers you, what's important to you, what your values. Let's see the things that are assumptions that we are invisible to us. And let's think about what is it that we're being called to do that's brave, that requires this courage, and where's our spark and creativity. So we do that work on ourselves. And that is in our being and thinking and who we are. But now we need to relate to others. Now we need to lead, and we have stuff to do. There's work to be done. And that's where we move more into how do we then connect with others? Connect with others with these four C's, with compassion, with curiosity. Are there people different to me? Do I need to lean into what I take for granted and assume about others? What are the courageous, difficult conversations that I need to have? What are the difficult things I need to explore? And how can I also ignite the creativity and get it out of myself, but also get the most out of others as well and help them find their creative flow? So the Chaya in it is that leadership and communication that bridges between this inner work that we do and the outer change we want to inspire.
Now, we mentioned in the beginning that you and I met at the Inner Development Goal Summit. And so a lot of the things that you're saying are part of the inner development goals, right? You talk about skills that are necessary, compassion, empathy, trust, and all of that, critical thinking. So, but if you look at the inner development goals, that basically developed and is a result of folks that were looking at the sustainable development goals where we are behind, right? We developed these 17 goals and we are on average at 15 to 70%. And we only have six more years to go, 5 more years. So how did you get involved or acquainted with the inner development goals? Did you come also from the sustainable development goals side, or did you come in contact with the IDGs from a different angle?
Yeah, a slightly different angle. It was the universe at work again. I have learned more and more through my years to listen to what the universe is actually telling me. Um, I had, as I said, I worked in communication and internal communication, and I had thought that all this work I'm doing is helping leaders to be better to themselves and to others. It's going to help internally in organizations, help people really with their own organization, very much in the bubble I knew. And then I went to an event which was about the leadership we need for sustainability. And sustainability is this drive that I've had from a really young age, and looking at what's happening with the climate. And I mean, my dad has this memory. We had a lot of trees in the garden, and we had a burglary. So had a break-in, and no one could see what was happening because the trees were blocking the view. So my dad was like, right, we need to cut the trees down for security. We need to cut the trees down. I was ready to tie myself to the trees. I cared so much. I was like, you are ruining this earth. You cannot cut down trees. I just cared so much about this. But I saw that as separate. I thought this was different to the work that I was doing. But when I went to this conference, things changed, because actually what they were talking about was compassionate leadership. They were talking about the courage to lead in a different way. We have to get curious about who we are and what we do. It was all the same thing, and it's like my world had just exploded and realized I have to follow this path, and I have to be able to feel confident that what I'm doing is adding value in a much broader sense. In that, when people are better connected to themselves, they are better to the people in their organization, and they make better decisions. Because they also connect with and care about not just me, but the systems around me and ecosystems around me. And that is kind of my introduction into this world of sustainability and the inner development goals. And what I was explaining just earlier around the inner work we do, and that, using the model, for example, that inner work is in the being and thinking of the inner development goals. And then there is this part where, in being able to lead and communicate, we need to relate. So that's the bridge, this relating. And that takes you to the next cycle, which is around how do we connect with others, which is how do we actually be able to collaborate and actually then get to action and influence action and behavior. And this was the place where, in my corporate career, I was this person I was brought in these places when we need to focus on behavior change. I was brought in these places where we need to help coach leaders in the transformation in themselves. So it's kind of been jigsaw pieces that have been put together along the way. And I'm hugely motivated by the realization, and I'm very much in a bubble with the inner development goals, is that I am around people who are in this place of knowing, this realization is that it is the inner work that we do on ourselves that makes the difference in who we are and how we do our work in the world, and even how we see our role in the world. Am I my profession, or am I also connected to a deeper purpose, and am I able to bring that to fruition? Am I able to be the best that I can be, so that I can be in service of the thing I'm here to do?
I would like to continue piggybacking on the connection. Yeah, that's what I hope this podcast will contribute a little bit to. We are connected to connect you with the listeners. I also would like to connect you with the previous guest, and the previous guest has a question for you.
How did you while coming of age, while becoming entering your later 20s, earlier 30s, 40s, 50s, how did you be okay with the fact that the decisions you make might be irreversible and might close the doors? And how did you have trust in your decisions in that process? I think I have a hard time like believing in my decisions, and I think it's something that I really need to develop if I want um to further grow as a responsible human being and adult.
Yeah, I think my earlier story about my professor's warning that if I leave psychology, I can never come back. That was 22 at that time, 21, 22. I was pretty young. I had to trust that there were nudges from something else, maybe within me, but also from outside me. Something was trying to get my attention, and it worked. I heard it. That I was meant to do something else, and I didn't know what that was. But actually, part of it is just trusting that there is a route and there's a time to move on. I had the same in my corporate career. Actually, in how old was I? Maybe late 30s, early 40s, maybe. Um, I got it hit my 10-year anniversary and I got a bracelet, a gold bracelet, which felt to me like a handcuff, but it was the nudge. To me, it felt like a commitment, but also not one I wanted. There was just this inner feeling of this is not my route. This is not what I want. This is not what I planned for. I just ended up here. So just to realize that we are going to take yes, and maybe it's irreversible, but actually we don't, why would we reverse? Why would we go back? Because actually we will go forward with a new experience. Um, and probably one of my coming of age moments is actually becoming a mother. So I was 29 when I became a mother, and that's when I realized, well, not only that my parents had done a good job in teaching me how to love, um, but also that as a parent, I am responsible to um, set a really good foundation um, of of not only loving my kids hugely, but also equipping them to be adults in the world who are a gift to the world. So, I think that in that is also that giving them the confidence that you will make mistakes and um, things will be tough along the way. And there are things that are not reversible. You can't go back, but you can always go forward and it will be different. And yeah, we came to the Netherlands and, it could be that we had a rubbish time here and we wanted to go and then we would go. And we have choice. And I think the luxury of choice, I realize just how much privilege I have in being able to make these choices, to live in different countries, to make a home here, to be able to have children, to be, all of these things. That choice is really a privilege, and so whatever the outcome, it's was there to teach you something. So that's a good question.
Nice, beautiful answer. Yeah, let us continue on the connection. Your question for the next guest.
My question is, what is the one space where you are your best authentic self? And space could be literally a place, physical place, or it could be a community, a being, somewhere you are. Where is it that you're authentic?
I don't know if you know it, and if I told you, but this podcast is a spin-off of a 100-mile walk that I started in 2012 to raise awareness about hunger, poverty, injustice, also about volunteerism. And then I was supposed to do it 1 year, got out of hand, so I'm still walking every year, and then often accompanied by people, and we talk about life, all kinds of things. But during COVID, I was not able to walk with others, so that's how this podcast started. Anyway, when I walked in really, in person with people, even if it's for 1 mile where they accompany me. We talk about, hey, why would you walk? For which cause? Would it be a cause that you would walk for? So yeah, that's my question. If you would be asked to walk 100 miles in a week or 5 to 7 days, what's the reason that you would walk?
There was a walk that I almost did, and I would like to do it again. But it's a refugee walk, and you walk overnight, and you walk no matter what the weather. You just carry what you can with you. So, ideally, you really try to experience what it is like for refugees who leave their country, and then you're on foot. You hit a blockage, something. You might have been in a car or some other mode of transport, but now you have to walk. And I have a real affinity with this word, like refugees, immigrants. In the Netherlands, I'm defined as a highly skilled worker, something like this. But it's like another layer of privilege that distinguishes me from somebody who's called an immigrant. When I took my in Netherlands inburgerings exams, but it's the immigration exams for language and culture, and I was in the room with every other person taking that exam. And why are they called an immigrant and I'm not? So to me, and some are called refugees and some are not. But we're all trying to, like my father was, you make a better life for yourself and you take opportunities that you can and you make choices. And those people are choosing to walk somewhere. And so that is a cause I think that's really close to what I find really meaningful. So yeah, I would like to do that refugee walk. And they walk mostly at night because apparently it's safer to walk at night than in the day. It all just speaks to all the things that are things you just really take for granted with my expensive boots and my waterproof jacket and my all the things that I have, but they may not have any of that, and yet they walk across many countries and many borders, and yeah, sometimes with their whole family. And yeah, I think that's a cause that really means something to me.
I have had a couple of guests that refer to that particular walk. I think in the Netherlands it's called maybe the Nacht van de Vluchteling, if I'm
Yes.
not mistaken. Yeah, continue to talk about walking. So, yeah, when I walk with somebody else, and this is especially after mile 10, because then your knee starts hurting. Well, at least my knees and my ankles. So you ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of life? So a question that I'm really interested in is around what is happening around the younger generation with regard to religion and spirituality. And so, because that's often a topic that I discuss with my fellow walkers. So what do you see in your environment? And you're living in the Netherlands now. What do you see happening with regard to youth, spirituality, and religion? And do they consider that as two separate things? Yeah.
Yeah, I have two kids. So I have a 16 and 14-year-old. I was brought up as a Hindu, but I was brought up as a spiritual person first. So my dad taught me to meditate. We to have deep philosophical conversations. He was also really involved in interfaith, so interfaith council. So always in the environment of curiosity around every religion and that unity around different religions. So my children have grown up with this sort of influence and the spirituality, and I think that religion for a younger generation is maybe difficult to relate to, whereas spirituality is much more inclusive. And it gives them freedom. And particularly when religions don't feel accessible because it might be difficult to understand, is that mindfulness, spirituality. Like there are lots of accessible ways to be able to deal with what life gives you. So I think, and to me, actually, I was brought up with a grounding in spirituality, but I didn't need it until I was at university and I was writing my dissertation, my thesis, and I was having a terrible time and I hit a wall. And at that point, I meditated, and at that point, I felt a connection to, yes, God, to spirituality, to something, and I found it by myself. No, if anything, I had a grounding in a religious framework, but the spirituality is a journey that I think for young people, they need the freedom to be able to explore what comes, and when they need it. There are going to be times in your life where when you lose someone, when you ask questions. And I think what we can do is be truthful about the answers we give them. So when young people have questions, let's be honest with them. Let's be really clear about, and also those things that are my belief. I believe that, and then I give my answer. What we don't want to do with religion, or what my own philosophy around this is that what I don't want to do is say that my answer is the right answer, my religion's answer is the right answer, and every other answer is not right. I want them to explore that here's what my belief system is. And that might be different for other people, but here's what my answer is based on this, my belief system. And have an open conversation about what their beliefs are, because often let's ask them, actually, let's ask young people about their belief system. What do they believe to be true, and what helps them in moments when they need support from something not of this world?
What I try to do during these conversations is to touch upon, the dance of science, religion, and the arts, truth, the good, the beautiful. So I have a question always about music, because that's important for me. And the question that I have for my guest is, if you had to choose a song or a piece of music that represents, for a big part, what you are about, which song or piece of music would that be, and why?
Yeah, this one, I thought this would be a really difficult question. It actually turns out to be quite easy to answer, because I had a look on my playlist, and it's Beyonce's I Was Here. And I think because it's a song that gives me goosebumps. It's a song that if I try and sing along, I get a lump in my throat. And yeah, there's a message which, I mean, some of the words is, I want to leave my footprints on the sands of time. When I leave this world, I'll leave no regrets, and leave something to remember so they won't forget. And it is really, we're each here and can make a mark on the world if only we kind of embrace that and believe it and say, why are you here? Like, there's a reason you're here. And that reason is very pure, and it's about the connection we make with another person. That's what will be what's our legacy, and that's the connections we made, not the money we made or the house we live in. It's those deeper connections. So that's a really special song, I think, for me.
And we will add that to the playlist on Spotify. If you search for #Walk Talk Listen, all the songs that were picked by my guest, you can find there. A really cool playlist from. There are a couple of songs of Beyonce, but not this one yet. So this is a new addition. So yeah, thanks. Yeah, so actually, this is a question that I wanted to ask you. In the US, there is I don't know if it still exists, but Steve Hartman of CBS was examining, the power of one simple act of kindness in creating a ripple effect. I have two questions around that, maybe for you. First one is what are your thoughts about one simple act of kindness and its ability to create a ripple effect? And then the second part of the question is, if I would ask you right now to commit to one simple act of kindness this week, what would you do?
To me, one of the beautiful acts of kindness is to really listen to somebody. We give them space to feel heard and seen and acknowledged. I was in London a few years ago, and you walk past homeless people all the time in London. And I put my hand in my pocket. I had a £20 note, and I gave it to this woman. And then I stopped. She said, thank you. And I actually stopped because I wanted I said, what's your story? And she had so much to say, so much. And I got to hear her story. The gift was not the 20. It wasn't the 20. And it kind of was the 20 because it was the opportunity to be heard for no motivation, but just somebody acknowledges you and hears your story. And in that, she shared things about her mother and her upbringing and feelings that were going on in the things that happened in her life and how she ended up there and how she feels now and what she wants in the future. And I think that's just really seeing someone and being able to hold the space for them. That's a real act of kindness. This week, my act of kindness isn't going to be a funny one, but it's going to be to myself because there's a sauna on the beach here, which is just down the road. But the sauna is on the beach. The sea temperature is pretty cold right now, and I'm going to be kind to myself, but I'm going to go in that water. And so I need a bit of courage, but actually it is a kindness to myself in taking care of my resilience. I think that is, to do these things that seem a little bit crazy, seem a little bit hard, but I know make me stronger. And so that's really part of a kindness to myself. And I think we forget to be kind to ourselves. We can sometimes be so giving to others, and I'm very much a culprit for it. Even this little sauna trip, it's with a good friend, but also a friend who often reminds me to be kind to myself. And yeah, so yeah, giving myself that experience to do a hard thing and do it for no real good reason other than I can. And so yeah, that's a kindness also to myself.
I'm going to push a little bit back in terms of for both those examples, how would that create a ripple effect?
In the case of really listening to somebody, so whenever I train on active listening, on deeper levels of listening, and most of the time when you teach someone to listen better, just a little bit better than what they currently do, they start to listen better to others. So they experience what it is like to be listened to, really listened to. And then you start to listen better to others. And that's a gift that just keeps, like, teaching someone listening skills, I think, is one of the biggest, yeah, that is maybe a bigger act of kindness, is teaching people how to listen. Because the ripple effect. I had a training I did in India, and then one of the guys who was in my class, he came back to me and he said, oh, my wife was so happy because I listened really well to her. It's like, great. And because now that has its ripple effect. So now maybe actually as parents, they listen better to their children. The children listen better to their parents. They listen better to their friends, to their teachers, to, what happens next is amazing. In terms of the self-care and the kindness to yourself, what comes to mind is this saying of, you can't pour from an empty jug. Is especially the work I do. I'm I'm a coach. I'm holding space for difficult conversations. I'm working in spaces where, yes, I work with people with very high IQ, and I'm trying to teach them and help them with the EQ part. That's hard stuff to do. And it's so much harder if I'm depleted, if I'm not doing well in my own health. So it is also a signal. And I think it's also a signal to leaders to think about how they take care of themselves. I think when we can do things that give leaders an opportunity, I mean, I'd love to do anything in nature, but taking folks away, go on a retreat and actually do that development work on yourself and hear yourself and have that kindness to yourself. From that, you can lead and hold space for the empathy for other people. That self-compassion makes the space for compassion for others.
Thanks for sharing it, and especially in terms of what you said around listening. I really, yeah, that's I hope that people get also is I've shared that with my listeners, is that I realized when I started this podcast is that I was not a great listener. I think I made some progress, although I'm still a work in progress, especially according to my wife, I think so. But and the example I gave is that when I was editing the podcast, I realized, oh, some very interesting things were said that I didn't hear because I was so too busy with either the next question or, oh yeah, I know this already. So because, very often we want to say all the stuff that we feel instead of, as you mentioned, really listening and what does that mean. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, these conversations always go fast. I have maybe two quick questions for you. One is, any last message or invitation or question you would like to share with the listeners?
An invitation. So I have a community. It's the Human Leadership Collective. I can share the link that your listeners can connect to. And it's a community that is really folks who connect with this message about human leadership and communication. We come together with a call and now it's changing very much next year. I'm trying something a little bit different. I've been doing the monthly calls. We might move to a little bit less frequency, but we'll do other things. So yeah, it's otherwise a free community to come and join and connect. It's also doubles up as a network for inner development goals. So it's also a place to just come and practice what we are preaching. I think that's it's very much about, can we actually do this reflection and hold a nice clean space that is safe for people to just come and connect and arrive.
You'll make
Yeah.
sure that we mention that the links in the podcast notes, so that they can. I mean, but tell maybe the link as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's my website is human leadership. Sorry, it's humanlyconsulting.com, and then it's human leadership collective. So yeah,
Right.
I will share the link. It's a lot easier. Yeah, and I think, well, generally my message is maybe more of a question to help people to just stop and reflect and think about, are you leading? Are you leading where and how you want to be leading? And just helping people to just think about that leadership is not the position they hold, it's really the outcome, it's the connections you have, and leadership and communication are so interconnected. So if you are working on your leadership and you're not working on your communication, then you're really hindering your ability to lead. So yeah, work on both, and always reach out for help. I think it's much harder for leaders the more senior they become, and even when we're leading ourselves or we're leading our families, or what capacity are you leading? Am I also really communicating in a way? And that communicating means listening as well. So it's the two-way, am I really working on myself in order to be able to lead?
Yeah, before we say goodbye, any question that I should have asked you, but I didn't?
Not that I can think of. No, yeah, I can't think. I think I've enjoyed this conversation and how it's
Me
kind
too.
of walked together through different topics. It's yeah, and I mean we met in a really cold courtyard in Stockholm, and I'm really glad that we've connected over a rubber ducky. So yeah, maybe this is the question actually, is like I guess the question I think we missed to ask is what was our connection when we met? And for me it was I'm not even sure how we got onto the conversation of the rubber ducky, but you shared something with me, which was that you have to put the rubber ducky down to be able to play the saxophone, and it is this sketch. And now, yeah, you have to also share the link to this sketch from Elmo, right? It's from
No,
Sesame
it's
Street.
Ernie. It's Ernie
Oh,
from
it's
Sesame Street.
Ernie from
Yeah, Ernie.
from Sesame
Yeah.
Street. And I see that yeah, there's sometimes we're holding some ideas, assumptions, thoughts, judgments, all these things we hold on to, but we can't actually do the beautiful thing we want to do, which in this case it was playing the saxophone, unless we put this thing down that we're holding on to. So yeah, we now have to leave the listeners curious to go and check out that.
I don't know if they heard me talking about this, but yeah, I mean, if you Google or you go to YouTube and you search for Put Down the Ducky and Sesame Street or Ernie, you will see the sketch. And basically, it's a song and where yeah he wants to learn how to play the saxophone. And then his fellow band member says, "Well, you need to put the ducky down first." So because you heard the squeaky sounds, right, when he was trying to play saxophone while holding on to the ducky. So yeah, very often I take the ducky with me during meetings and I just put it on the table. And
It's very powerful.
so thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your story, and yeah, good luck with everything you do. We'll make sure that the links are there in the podcast notes that people can find you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Maurice. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.